You've shared a really fascinating stack of sources with us. It's this blend of Victorian literary history, biographical scandal, and some really sharp contemporary cultural critique.
It is, and it all revolves around a single novel that's, what, over 130 years old now,
Exactly. We're talking about Oscar Wilde's classic, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
which is, maybe the most enduring work of that whole fin de siècle period.
Yeah.
It's a novel that absolutely terrified its original audience.
But feels surgically precise now.
Surgically precise. That's a perfect way to put it. It's like it was written for the 21st century.
And that's really why we're here today. All our sources argue that Wilde's novel is this terrifyingly accurate map of the modern ego,
Uh-huh. It deals in themes like performative identity, narcissism.
the crushing weight of external validation, all things we are swimming in right now.
Has
So our mission today is a true deep dive. We're going to extract the most important nuggets about why this novel, born in the height of Victorian hypocrisy, acts as this chilling, almost prescient warning for you, our listener, about the true price of the curated life.
And we should be clear, we aren't just summarizing a plot here. This is about dissecting a huge philosophical conflict. We need to get into not just what Dorian Gray did, but why his story resonates so deeply today.
It's about the interplay between art, ethics.
And the soul. The soul is this quantifiable, decaying thing that you just can't hide forever.
Okay, I think that's the perfect place to start. Let's unpack this crucial connection between the 1890s and right now. Let's just jump in with the core hook, because I think this is what justifies dragging a Victorian novel into our current conversation.
Okay.
The Picture of Dorian Gray is essentially a warning about the digital profile you are currently building, whether you even realize it or not.
That analogy is so resonant, it's perfect because it immediately zeroes in on the central conflict, which is this radical, almost magical separation of the self.
The presented self versus the real self.
The presented self from the actual internal reality. I mean, the novel was written when photography was just starting to define public image, and it predicted our modern society in these uncanny ways. It made external appearance the sole currency of a man's worth.
And Dorian's greatest desire was just to look perfect.
Forever.
Forever. Regardless of the chaos and the corruption just churning inside him, it's the ultimate filter.
It is more than just a filter, though, isn't it? It feels like a literal pact with vanity.
It is. I mean, think about the pressure you feel, the pressure inherent in maintaining a perfect social media presence, the constant optimization,
The cropping out of reality.
the performance of happiness, of success. You are witnessing a collective attempt to achieve a modern form of Dorian's wish.
The external self has to be flawless.
It must be flawless, even if the internal self is, bored or anxious or just fundamentally corrupted by the chase for that perfection. And the source material makes this stunning and, I think, deeply ironic point about Wilde's own life being a cautionary tale for his own message.
Oh, absolutely. Wilde writes this novel exploring the terrifying price of aesthetic obsession and the double life you have to lead to maintain it. And then, what, in 1895?
He's sent to prison.
He's sent to prison for that very perceived decadence and immorality. The publication, the whole atmosphere it created, the moral outrage, it was all directly used to bring about his total ruin.
There's an almost awful symmetry to that.
It's chilling.
The character, Dorian, lives a life without any physical consequence for his sins. But the author, Oscar Wilde, pays the highest physical price imprisonment, exile, just for describing the possibility.
It proves that the price for confronting a society's hypocrisy is often paid in full by the messenger, the one who dares to pull back the curtain.
What's truly fascinating to me is that Wilde went to prison partly because his art was just too truthful about those curated masks that define London society.
Yes. The book was seen as a spiritual biohazard to the rigid Victorian public. It suggested that some sins, if you dressed them up in enough beauty and wit, well, they were just too gorgeous to resist.
And that suggestion became evidence of his own corrupted soul in court.
It collapsed the line between art and life completely.
So, to really establish this modern parallel, right now you are carrying a version of Dorian Gray's portrait right in your pocket. Every filtered photo, every calculated post, every curated stream of content is a mask. It's designed to preserve a perfect static surface.
So the crucial question the story asks is,
What is happening to the real you? While your digital profile stays eternally optimized and perfect, is your soul getting heavier, older, more distorted behind that flawless facade?
if the essence of the novel is about external perfection masking internal decay, then our digital lives constantly optimize for external validation, for likes. We are replicating that precise psychological horror.
We're all preserving a surface.
A surface that never ages, never shows grief, never shows the scars of the past. Wilde showed us exactly the kind of moral and psychological madness that happens when you completely divorce beauty from truth.
So a life without consequences isn't freedom at all.
It's a form of perpetual psychological bondage. It traps you in an eternal performance.
Okay, before we get any deeper into the analysis, let's make sure everyone has the framework. We'll start with a non-spoiler overview of the context, and then we'll dive into the specifics.
Good idea. Let's set the stage.
So where are we?
We're in London, the 1890s. And the sources all highlight that it was a city just defined by its suffocating hypocrisy, those curated masks we mentioned.
So on the surface, everything is very proper.
Extremely. External morality was strictly enforced, particularly among the elite. You had to appear righteous, moral, stable.
And underneath.
But beneath that strict surface lay this flourishing underworld. Hidden rooms, private indulgences, secret societies. Wilde understood this duality implicitly because he lived it. He moved between polished drawing rooms and the city's shadows.
And in this world, we have three main players. It's this ultimate psychological triangle.
It is.
First, there's Dorian Gray himself, the ultimate experimental subject.
Beautiful, wealthy, young, and obsessed with preserving his surface. He's the embodiment of aesthetic perfection, but he's also fundamentally passive, very easily influenced.
Which brings us to the other 2 points of the triangle. Let's start with Basil Hallward.
Basil is the painter. He's the genuine artist, the man who can see and capture true beauty. His masterpiece, the portrait of Dorian, is what inspires the fatal wish.
So he represents the conscience, the moral compass.
Exactly. He's the witness. He has this pure, almost worshipful view of Dorian, which, kind of blinds him to the corruption, at least at first.
And then there's Lord Henry Wotton.
Ah, Lord Henry, the intellectual puppet master. He is the voice of temptation, the cynical, witty philosopher who speaks in these polished aphorisms.
He's the one who really catalyzes Dorian's corruption.
Completely. He doesn't do anything immoral himself, not really. But his words provide the justification for everything Dorian does.
Okay, so what's the general premise? How does this all kick off?
It all hinges on this moment of intense vanity. Dorian sees Basil's finished portrait, which captures his beauty at its absolute zenith. And he has this rash thought, this wish.
He wishes the painting would get old instead of him.
That the canvas would bear the burden of his aging and his cruelty, allowing him to remain eternally young and perfect.
And this separation of cause from effect, that's the core of it.
That's the foundational psychological horror of the story. Once the wish is granted, Dorian is detached from the physical signs of his own sin, and that's where his descent begins.
That detachment. The sources point out that this is the real engine of the plot.
It's the ultimate forbidden fantasy, isn't it? The ability to act without any social, physical, or personal penalty. It's the beginning of the God complex that just completely consumes him.
Okay, let's put up the spoiler warning now, because this is where the story shifts from a philosophical fable into true Gothic horror.
In a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
Dorian Gray is corrupted not just by his own vanity, but by the intellectual poison of Lord Henry.
And the immediate catalyst for this, the thing that really pushes him, is a book.
A mysterious, anonymously published, decadent French novel.
The sources call it the Yellow Book, and I love this analogy they use. They say it becomes the 1890 version of an algorithm for self-destruction.
That is such a potent way to put it. It links this physical object, a book in a yellow paper cover, to the insidious, addictive nature of tailored content. It wasn't just a book.
It was a blueprint.
A blueprint for a life devoted entirely to sensation. It promoted what it called the religion of pleasure, and just urged Dorian to yield to every single temptation, no matter the cost to other people.
And this philosophy, it immediately dictates the path of his cruelty.
Immediately, Dorian starts treating every single person he meets as what the sources call disposable accessories.
For his vanity.
Yes. He sees his own life as a piece of performance art to be curated, and other people are just props, supporting content.
The prime example being the actress, Sybil Vane.
Oh, Sybil, yes. She's a young actress he falls in love with, mostly because she's a brilliant performer.
But when she falls truly in love with him, her acting suffers.
Her real emotions interfere with her artistic perfection. And Dorian, who only valued her as an aesthetic experience, just casts her aside.
And he's chilling about it. He tells her she's ruined his evening, that she's dull now.
Just cold detachment. And when she tragically takes her own life, Dorian looks at the portrait. And that's when he sees the first visible change.
A cruel sneer.
A line of cruelty around the mouth. The pact is real. And from that point on, he fundamentally loses his ability to empathize. He's commodified every human interaction.
Which leads us years later to the most critical, terrible moment, the murder.
The murder and the attic. Basil Hallward, his old friend, is distraught by the rumors swirling around Dorian's corruption. He confronts him, and he demands to see his soul.
And Dorian shows him. He takes him up to the attic to see the portrait.
And in a fit of rage and disgust at Basil's horror, Dorian murders him. He scabs him with the same knife he'd once used to, dissect his own past life.
It's the ultimate act of silencing the conscience.
It is. By killing the artist who created the portrait, who created him in a way, Dorian tries to destroy the only person who truly witnesses his complete fall.
He hides the portrait back in the attic, which really does function as the tomb of his humanity.
His subconscious. It's this dark, suffocating corner of his mind where he pushes all the moral truths he can't face. And for years, he goes up there with this mix of horror and morbid fascination, just unable to look away from his own decaying reflection.
He spends all this time trying to live up to the perfect image he has in public, knowing that all the rot is just accumulating upstairs.
He tries to destroy evidence, burning Basil's things, trying to forget. But the canvas remains. It records every single stain.
Which brings us to the ending. Wilde's masterful twist, which is still shocking.
It really is. Tormented by the truth on the canvas, which now looks like this hideous old man with a murderer's hands, Dorian decides he has to destroy it.
He takes the same knife he used to kill Basil.
And plunges into the artwork, claiming to destroy the evidence of his soul and finally be free of his guilt.
But Wilde's twist confirms the permanence of truth, the inescapable link between the man and his soul, even when they're magically separated.
The moment the art is destroyed, the magic is severed. Reality asserts itself. The servants hear a crash, they break in, and they find
a withered, wrinkled, and loathsome corpse on the floor. It's Dorian Gray, but he's unrecognizable.
except for the rings on his fingers.
And on the wall.
The portrait is hanging there, returned to its original perfect state of youthful splendor. In destroying the art, Dorian destroyed the man he had preserved.
It shows you can't kill your conscience without killing yourself.
You really can't.
The sheer shock and controversy this book caused is so tied up with the man who wrote it. So let's pivot now. Let's look at the human story behind it. Because this story was, in so many ways, an accidental prophecy of Wilde's own tragic life.
It really was. Wilde was fundamentally fighting a philosophical war. A war for the pretty lie, as your sources phrase it. He was the chief champion of the aesthetic movement in England.
And his core philosophy, which he famously summarized in the preface to the novel, was that art has no moral duty.
Exactly. There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are simply well-written or badly written. This was his opening shot against the Victorians, who believed art's only purpose was to instruct and uplift.
But Wilde believed in art for art's sake.
Purely for pleasure. And Dorian Gray was his grand experiment to test that premise. He wanted to see what would happen if you let a protagonist live a purely aesthetic life, totally free from ethical rules.
He was challenging the Victorian obsession with morality by proposing a world where beauty was the only virtue.
But the initial spark, the idea itself, was surprisingly simple and very human.
It wasn't even his own vanity.
No, it was a reflection of a friend's. The idea came to him while he was in the studio of his painter friend, Basil Ward. He was looking at a portrait, and Wilde lamented that the beautiful living subject would eventually wither, while the oil on the canvas would stay young forever.
And that small, melancholic observation just sparked everything.
He seized it. He wrote the first draft for Lippincott's monthly magazine at a lightning pace. He was determined to prove that the soul was a physical, terrifying thing that you could actually see if you just pulled the curtain back.
He wanted to show that your internal state could manifest in a real, observable way, even if you hid that manifestation in an attic.
But the initial version caused such an outrage that the publisher removed almost 500 words before it even went to print.
A massive self-censorship.
To preempt the moral panic. But Wilde, being the brilliant provocateur he was, didn't shy away. When he expanded it for the 1891 novel, he didn't apologize.
He doubled down.
He added the now famous preface. Witty, defiant, full of these aesthetic aphorisms, he pretended to soften the perceived immorality with this art for art's sake rhetoric.
But the sources say he actually made the trap more intricate.
He did. He dared readers to admit they were fascinated by the very darkness they were publicly condemning. He wrote the book, in part, to show the Victorians the ugliness of their own souls.
But the most chilling parallel is his own prophetic double life.
Wilde lived it. He moved through the polite world of society drawing rooms, charming everyone with his wit, while secretly indulging in the shadow world. Same-sex relationships, which were strictly illegal.
So the theme of the double life in the book, Dorian's public perfection masking private corruption, that was the terrible reality of Wilde's own existence.
And his complex, toxic relationship with Lord Alfred Douglas, Bosie, as he was known, the sources suggest that was a real-life inspiration for the kind of corrosive influence Lord Henry has in the book.
Bosie was younger, beautiful, demanding.
And he mirrored the way Lord Henry drove Dorian toward this total hedonistic abandonment of duty and morality.
So Wilde's playing a very public and a very dangerous game.
He was. The novel became this uncomfortable mirror reflecting his own hidden world, detailing the exact mechanisms of psychic and social ruin. When you realize the most terrifying parts of Dorian Gray weren't pure fiction, but a reflection of Wilde's lived reality and his impending downfall.
The novel takes on an entirely new weight.
He wrote his own tragic map.
We really do have to place this novel firmly in the 1890s, the fin de siècle, to understand why it just exploded. Let's talk about that unique tension of Victorian hypocrisy.
Okay, so 1890s London was dominated by this stern, unrelenting, very public morality. The era demanded the absolute suppression of the natural, darker, or sexual self.
Your shadow self.
The shadow self, exactly. You had to maintain the surface of propriety and righteousness at all costs. But, as we said, beneath this rigid exterior was a thriving, almost frantic world of deep indulgence. The entire upper-class society operated on this foundation of curated masks.
So what you did in private was tolerated.
As long as your public reputation remained spotless.
Which meant that reputation was everything. It was the absolute currency of the time.
It was. If your reputation was ruined, if even a whisper of scandal attached to your name, that was an instant social and economic death sentence.
Which makes Dorian's magical immunity the core of the novel's power. His ability to stay aesthetically perfect despite all the damning rumors was the ultimate forbidden fantasy for that hypocritical elite.
And Wilde's genius was in exposing the flaw in that system. If appearances were everything, then Dorian's flawless face meant his ability to act without social or legal penalty was absolute.
It allowed him to live as a ghost in his own life, untouched by grief or time.
Or the physical marks of his own cruelty. It was a searing critique of a society that valued the lie of beauty over the reality of truth.
And the novel itself was a product of the aesthetic movement, which was challenging the whole worldview of the time.
Yes, it was pushing back against utilitarianism. Utilitarianism asked, is this action useful? Is it morally beneficial?
While the aesthetic movement, led by Wilde, asked,
is this action beautiful? Is it interesting? This wasn't just about art. It was a philosophical statement that beauty was the highest good, an idea that directly fueled Dorian's destructive path.
So when the book debuted in Lippincott's in 1890, the public reaction was not good.
It was instant rage. It was like a societal breakdown because it named the hidden disease. The critical firestorm was intense, especially against the novel's atmosphere of decadence and suggestion.
The critics didn't see a complex moral fable.
No, they saw a philosophical crime against public decency.
And the language they used goes so far beyond literary opinion. The sources quote them calling it a work with a mephitic odor of moral and spiritual putrefaction.
A stench of corruption.
They called it unclean, poisonous, heavy with the odors of the bizarre.
Yeah.
It wasn't just reserved judgment, it was a full-blown moral panic. Society was violently rejecting the mirror Wilde held up to them.
And that atmosphere of scandal, decadence, the veiled references, it was all leveraged against Wilde during his 1895 trial for gross indecency.
The prosecution held the novel up in court
as primary evidence of his corrupted character and soul. Passages were read aloud, specifically the ones detailing the toxic relationship between Dorian and Lord Henry, implying a real-life parallel that the jury was meant to condemn.
It's the ultimate tragedy of that era. The very wit and charm that made him a celebrity were used to dismantle his life.
And the work, which explored the fatal consequences of aestheticism divorced from ethics, led directly to his imprisonment and exile. He experienced this public, brutal social decay that mirrored Dorian's own final private collapse.
So the book wasn't just a controversy, it was a weapon.
It was. Censored, banned, and used as primary evidence in a court case, all because it detailed a lifestyle that the very elites judging him were secretly practicing, but refused to acknowledge in the light of day. The historical context confirms that Wilde's novel truly hit a nerve in the most lethal way possible.
All right, now we can really get into the intellectual core of this deep dive. Let's set aside the plot and the biography for a moment. What are the fundamental questions the novel asks that are still so relevant today? Let's start with the big one. The aesthetic versus the ethical.
This is the novel's engine. Wilde explored how the singular, total pursuit of beauty, the aesthetic ideal, when it's completely divorced from any pursuit of truth or morality, the ethical ideal leads to a very specific kind of madness.
Which is nihilism.
Pure nihilism. Dorian starts by worshiping beauty, believing his life should be a work of art. But because he chooses to be utterly selfish and cruel in that pursuit, his aestheticism just degrades very quickly into a complete rejection of any inherent value in anything or anyone.
And the chief driver of that nihilism is the danger of influence, which is embodied by Lord Henry Wotton.
Yes, Henry's philosophy, this new hedonism, is a total rejection of the strict, duty-bound Victorian work ethic. Concepts like sacrifice. Henry suggests life should be an endless, constant search for new, exotic sensations.
Regardless of the consequences for other people.
Regardless. And this blueprint, it acts as a psychological poison. It doesn't just tempt Dorian, it actively reprograms him toward destruction.
Lord Henry is so corrosive because he's all intellect and no heart.
Exactly. He never risks anything himself. He prefers to observe human life as an experiment from the comfortable distance of cynicism. He doesn't commit the sins, he just provides the sophisticated, witty justification for Dorian to commit them.
Which makes him the ultimate accessory to the crime. A philosophical saboteur.
100%. And Dorian truly internalizes this role. He transforms into what we could accurately call the original content creator.
I love that framing. He views his life not as a moral journey, but as a piece of art to be curated. Like an influencer curating a perfect feed.
He is the original main character, and in his world, everyone else is just disposable content to be consumed or discarded based on whether they enhance his aesthetic vision of himself.
That is a critical point that really demands we expand on it. Once you decide that people are just content or props in your personal drama,
you lose the ability to see their intrinsic human worth. And that coldness is perfectly illustrated by the Sybil Vane tragedy. Dorian didn't care about her suffering or her love. He only valued her as an aesthetic experience, a perfect Juliet.
And when her real emotions got in the way, she lost her value as perfection and he tossed her aside.
The modern parallel is disturbing. The moment a person, a relationship, or a location stops optimizing your feed, it gets deleted, ghosted, without a second thought.
And that emotional vacuum inside him leads directly to this other theme. Consumerism and the vacuum of self.
Yes, the sources highlight Dorian's frantic collecting of rare artifacts. Tapestries, jewels, exotic perfumes, musical instruments. This isn't genuine artistic appreciation.
It's a form of high-end frantic consumerism.
It represents the delusional belief that he could literally buy a soul, or at least fill the gaping vacuum of his existence with beautiful, expensive things. He collected and studied them not for knowledge, but for sensation.
Building a temporary fortress of luxury.
Hoping that if he surrounded himself with enough history and art and exoticism, the emptiness inside would just fill up. But of course, no amount of rare Turkish silk or Venetian jewels can provide you with a conscience. They only amplify the hollowness.
And the most terrifying implication of his perfect appearance is how he functions as the social predator.
Yes, because Dorian remains aesthetically perfect, despite the undeniable trail of ruined reputations, broken hearts, and even deaths he leaves behind, he operates as a social predator with complete impunity.
The sources call him a high society virus.
Or a golden boy whose charm actively cultivated rot in the people around him. Young men who spent an evening with him found their reputations destroyed by mourning. Women who fell for his charm ended up ruined or exiled.
So he didn't just hide his own decay.
He exported it. He lured others into the same corrupt philosophy that had poisoned him. This secondary layer of horror, the exporting of moral decay, is what truly made the novel a threat, and why we're still talking about him.
And this perfection he has creates a profound cognitive dissonance in London society. People hear the terrible rumors, the whispers of sin.
But because Dorian's face remains flawlessly youthful and innocent, society universally chooses to believe the lie. They needed the lie of his perfection to justify their own hypocritical existence.
Which begs the modern question. Are we still being fooled by the same visual trick today? Prioritizing the perfect image over the troubling truth.
I think we know the answer to that.
Let's delve into the deep psychology of these figures now. Wilde imbued them with archetypes that speak to different parts of the human ego. Let's start with Dorian Gray himself and his profound isolation.
Because he never ages, he exists outside the natural collective flow of human life. He literally watches his friends grow old, suffer illness, and die, while he remains this static, unmoving statue of youth.
Which creates this deep weariness of life, a profound boredom, a soul-crushing numbness.
The sources refer to this state as anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure. And that is the ultimate paradox of the book.
He believes he's achieved freedom, but a life without the fear of consequences, without the structure of time.
It's not freedom, it's a gilded cage. He loses the ability to cherish life precisely because he can't lose it. His descent into the darkest sins was born of this desperate, clawing need to feel something.
Any powerful sensation, even pain or fear.
Anything that could pierce through the numbness of his eternal perfection. He realizes far too late that his youth was not a shield, but a magnifying glass for his misery. It forced him to view every error magnified 1,000 times in his hidden portrait.
Then there's Lord Henry Wotton and his intellectual detachment, the voice of pure, polished provocation.
He is the servant in the garden, speaking in perfect, witty epigrams. Henry is defined by his detachment. He's the philosopher who treats life as a theoretical exercise, all intellect and no heart.
Never staining his own hands.
Never. He prefers to observe human life like an experiment in a petri dish. He teaches Dorian to value only the surface, making him incapable of genuine love, empathy, or sacrifice. He's the embodiment of the idea that a clever explanation is better than a simple moral truth.
And opposite him, we have Basil Hallward, the painter, the moral center.
The conscience of the novel. He's the man who sees Dorian's true, inherent goodness and is just heartbroken by his corruption. Basil represents the high moral standard of the artist who believes art should capture truth, not just beauty.
And his murder is the moment Dorian chooses to permanently silence that conscience.
It's not just a crime against a friend, it is an act of psychic self-mutilation. By killing the artist who loved him purely, who knew the secret of his soul, Dorian tries to destroy moral accountability itself.
He believes he can stay pure by eliminating the witness to his actions.
He tries to delete the evidence and the memory. But the psychological toll of this life is immense, and it leads to the inevitable narcissist's hallucination.
As the years pass, his beautiful, orderly house stops being a sanctuary.
It becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting only his profound, inescapable guilt. The toll manifests as constant, low-level paranoia. He starts seeing the faces of his victims in the patterns of his wallpaper. He hears the painting breathing through the attic door.
The sources emphasize this is the ultimate stage of narcissism, when the self becomes the only thing that exists.
The self also becomes the only thing that can successfully hunt and haunt you. Dorian was afraid of the silence in his own corridors, hunted not by a ghost, but by his own tormented reflection. He ends up in opium dens, trying to escape his own perfection, realizing his eternal beauty has made him a prisoner.
For those who really appreciate the craft of writing, Wilde's style is just essential to the novel's power. He used this rich, evocative prose that saturates the reader's senses.
Absolutely. It's a hallmark of decadent literature. The prose is designed to feel overwhelming, almost sickly sweet, mirroring the seductiveness of Dorian's moral decay. The sources describe it as like walking through a hothouse of exotic, suffocating lilies.
The style is intense, sensory-heavy. He uses synesthesia, blending the senses.
Yes, he describes music as having color, or sense as having texture. It creates this atmosphere that's both intensely beautiful and deeply unsettling, which perfectly mirrors the psychological trap Dorian falls into.
And then there's the terrifying symbolism of the rotting soul, which is made physical in the portrait. Wilde detailed the physical biology of corruption with what the sources call a surgeon's precision.
He transforms the painting from a static object into a dynamic character in the story. The canvas records the stain of every cruel act, meticulously documenting this process of moral entropy. It shows a wrinkled throat and the leering mouth, the physical manifestation of internal vice.
It wasn't just rotting passively, which would imply just decay.
No, it was described as pulsing, growing heavy and wet with corruption. The portrait was becoming the horrifying reality, visceral and alive, while Dorian himself was losing substance, fading into a beautiful ghost that haunted his own perfect life.
Wilde was saying that the internal truth is always physical and undeniable, even if you hide it.
Even if it's temporarily hidden, yes.
The attic itself serves as a key literary device here. The attic as the subconscious.
It's this isolated, dusty, high-up room where Dorian pushes the memories and truths he can't afford to face in his public life.
And the contrast is so deliberately powerful. Downstairs, you have sunlight, perfect manners, polished marble, the flawless life.
And upstairs, you have the suffocating gloom of the attic, reflecting the widening chasm in Dorian's psyche. The attic is the tomb of his humanity, a necessary part of his mind he compulsively visits, unable to truly forget his past. It shows that repression requires constant, morbid engagement with the thing you're repressing.
And a fascinating detail about his frantic efforts to suppress the signs of decay, or maybe the invisible signs, masking the smell of sin.
Oh, yes. Dorian obsessively used heavy, exotic perfumes. He sought out intoxicating sensory experiences.
Which is a perfect metaphor for his attempts to cleanse his conscience externally.
He was desperately trying to mask the invisible smell of the rotting thing in his attic, trying to drown his conscience and his moral sense in a sea of fragrance and sensation. He created this artificially stimulated world where his senses were constantly overwhelmed so his mind would never have a quiet moment to reflect.
Or worse, to hear the whisper of his own guilt.
Precisely. But the portrait was more than just a diary of his deeds. It was a living map of his intentions.
It shifted the moment a cruel desire crossed his mind. It didn't wait for the crime itself.
Which suggests this powerful theological concept, that the soul is a living map of our intentions. Dorian was being judged in real time by a canvas that had more integrity than he did. His cruelest sins were often preceded by a subtle shift in the painting, showing him what he was about to do.
Trapping him in a loop where checking the painting only deepened the corruption.
The reflection became his moral judge, and he became a prisoner of his own gaze.
And one last profound technique you pulled from the sources, the ancestral shadow. Dorian looks at the portraits of his forefathers, a line of titled, wealthy men, and wonders if his sins are truly his own.
Or if they're just a high-definition version of his parents' mistakes.
That speaks directly to generational trauma, the weight of inherited guilt.
It raises that uncomfortable question of fate versus free will. Are we making original moral choices? Or are we just reenacting the same self-destructive tragedies that were written in our blood centuries ago? Dorian's terror is not just his wickedness, but the realization that even his profound moral failure lacks originality.
It makes him a pawn in an old, decadent family history.
A terrible thought.
So as we discussed, the book's initial release generated the Victorian scandal. The rage was instantaneous because it just exposed the fundamental hypocrisy of the era.
The gap between what society claimed to be and what it secretly practiced.
And Dorian's continued perfection meant people chose the easy path. They chose to believe the lie over the rumors.
Which exposed a profound cognitive dissonance in society. The appearance of beauty and respectability trumped the difficult, messy truth of moral corruption. It was just easier to condemn Wilde than to admit that Dorian Gray was a reflection of their own desires.
And the novel's notoriety led directly to it being banned and controversial.
It was central to Wilde's downfall. The book was held up as evidence of his corrupted soul during his criminal trial. The public and legal system essentially conflated the art with the artist.
Believing the wickedness described in the novel was proof of the wickedness of the writer.
Yes. Wilde died in exile, broken by the very standards of beauty and artifice he had so brilliantly exposed.
But today, the modern view is so radically different. The legacy has entirely outlived the scandal. It's now celebrated precisely for the elements that horrified the Victorians.
It's now recognized as a foundational text of modern psychological literature. It explored narcissism, performative identity, self-loathing, the existential horror of profound boredom, long before those terms were common in clinical psychology.
Its ability to articulate the horror of the detached, hollow self is why it endures.
The enduring power of the story is in its ability to make us profoundly uncomfortable with our own reflection. And that feeling remains hyper-relevant in our age of constant self-optimization.
What's fascinating is that the Victorians saw a wicked man being celebrated, and they hated it. Modern readers see a profoundly broken man trapped by his own wish, and they understand his life is a tragedy.
And that shift in perspective is what transformed the book from a scandal into a cornerstone of literature.
The story's haunting premise, a man watching his soul decay while his body stays flawless, has created these deep ripples across modern art and culture.
Oh, for sure. Its impact influenced the entire Gothic film genre and so many modern psychological thrillers. It's in the literary DNA of horror now.
The central premise has been adapted countless times, even if it's implicitly.
All right, think of any Faustian bargain where physical perfection is exchanged for moral decay. The story introduced the idea that the true horror isn't the monster under the bed. It's the monster you nurture inside yourself while the outside world celebrates you.
The ending, in particular, carries enormous weight, the permanence of truth.
Yes, that final scene where the truth asserts its dominance and the withered corpse is discovered. It serves as this powerful, unavoidable warning.
That the bill for our vanity comes due.
You can spend a lifetime airbrushing your history, but the cumulative weight of who you are will ultimately define you.
And the novel's influence extends into the discussion of identity itself. It challenges the assumption that your face is a reliable map of your soul.
And in an age where we are constantly presented with images of beauty that bear no relation to the internal reality, Dorian Gray remains the ultimate cautionary tale. Its ability to make us uncomfortable with our own reflection means it continues to matter.
It speaks directly to our obsession with maintaining an aesthetic surface.
In essence, the story asks, what happens when we achieve the ultimate vanity, eternal perfection, and find that perfection is utterly hollow and soul-destroying? The novel continues to matter because our digital age has made the curation of the self easier and more addictive than ever.
But the consequences of that detachment remain universal and inevitable. As we bring this deep dive to a close, I keep coming back to that chilling concept of the ancestral shadow.
Dorian looking at the portraits of his forefathers.
Yes, these men who are also cruel, decadent, privileged, and him wondering if his sins are truly his own or just a high-definition version of his parents' mistakes.
It's such a profound thought about fate and free will. We all carry the historical and psychological weight of our ancestors, and Dorian's realization is the terror that even his wickedness lacks originality.
That he is simply the latest, most detailed iteration of a centuries-old family curse. The terror is that he's done nothing new, only perfected the performance of inherited cruelty.
And here's where the analysis of the sources provided, for me, the most critical insight. The profound realization that even when Dorian tried to be good at the end,
When he spared that young, innocent girl, Hetty Morton, from his charms.
even then the portrait became even more hideous. It didn't revert to its pristine state. Instead, the painting bore the look of hypocrisy.
The most subtle, maybe the most damning of all sins in Wilde's world.
Exactly. Wilde is suggesting that the act of being good, when it's done solely to check the moral state of the painting, is just another form of vanity, of self-obsession. The intention matters more than the deed.
A performative act of morality, designed to make the actor feel better, is ultimately just another form of corruption.
Yes.
So the key takeaway for you, our listener, is this. Dorian's youth was not a shield. It was a magnifying glass for his misery.
By magically removing death and consequence from his equation, by making himself immune to time, he inadvertently removed life as well.
And that led to profound boredom, anhedonia, and numbness.
He became a parasite on his own perfect past, perfectly preserved, but totally without purpose or growth. He lived long enough to watch his own soul liquefy and to become a stranger to himself. The novel powerfully demonstrates that the natural rhythm of aging, suffering, and decay is essential to the human experience of meaning.
So who would enjoy this today?
Anyone curious about the origins of modern psychological horror, I think? Or those who feel that deep, low-level unease about the performative nature of social media?
Especially when you compare your internal reality to the perfect feeds you see online.
Exactly. If you've ever felt inadequate after scrolling through someone's optimized profile, this is the book that explains the psychological toll of that obsession.
So we've explored how Oscar Wilde's map of the human ego, written in the height of Victorian moralizing, remains terrifyingly accurate for our digital age. We've confirmed that the most effective monsters are, indeed, the ones we create ourselves and then hide away in the attic of our own mind.
And the true tragedy of Dorian Gray wasn't that he died, it was that he lived long enough to become a stranger to himself, preserved in a casket of his own perfect skin until the very end. The ultimate punishment was being eternally beautiful and entirely meaningless.
The core warning endures. Do not let your curated life be the only beautiful thing you leave behind. The truth is an inescapable mirror, and you can only run from your reflection for so long before the knife is the only option left. Pull back the curtain on your own inner attic before the final, undeniable bill for your vanity comes due.